General Cooper, if you're appointed to a second term, what will be your primary objectives during your second term in office, and how will you accomplish those goals?
Sure. Elle, I think kind of in a broader level, the primary objective of the office should always be to maintain its operation at the highest level, providing the best quality, independent legal advice to the state. So that always is the key objective. Now, within that, I think that there are a couple of priorities that I talked about in my remarks this morning, newer initiatives that the office has started that obviously I would like to see kind of grow roots and flower and get to the point where they're at their maximum effectiveness. I think that also there are some other initiatives that Governor Haslam has recently identified where our office could play and should play a significant role. The governor has a task force on opioid abuse. That is obviously a terrible problem, an epidemic in the state of Tennessee. Last year, when as the chair of the southern region of the National Association of Attorneys General, we had a conference here in Tennessee. That was one of the topics that we discussed. Now, the governor's task force is going to be looking at that issue, and obviously we will work with them and look at it to see if there is an appropriate role for the Attorney General to play in combating that scourge. It's something that we've already done in the area of synthetic drugs. We'd like to see us do something there. The governor has also recently created a task force to deal with revisions, possible revisions to the criminal code. Now, that is an area that obviously will impact our office greatly since we are responsible for defending all criminal convictions. So we'll be defending those statutes, defending their application in particular cases, defending their constitutionality. So we would expect to work closely with this group as it goes forward with its work. I guess another area, obviously, where we would continue to have a focus just because of the scope and the importance to citizens across the state is the application of the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act to make that effective and a protection for all our citizens. And then finally, to move away from those kind of substantive areas to a more procedural, one area that always has to be a priority of the office, and it's been alluded to, is making sure that we do everything we can, not just to attract great lawyers, but also to retain them. And so that's something that we have focused on, and obviously we will continue to focus on.
Thank you. Justice Clark?
General Cooper, in your first answer, you may have answered part of the second question in talking about initiatives and particular programs. I'll ask if there are any other specific duties of the Attorney General that you think are particularly important starting this next term. But then more broadly than that, it is your obligation to provide legal advice and counsel to many, many people across state government, and their needs and their desires may sometimes be inconsistent with each other. How do you deal with that?
Certainly. First, in terms of our statutory duties, and I have alluded to some, but clearly we take seriously our responsibility with regard to all the statutory duties that we are given. That represents policy choices of the General Assembly, that they want us to be involved in these areas and want us to help enforce those statutes. And so we are going to do our best to fulfill those roles. So in that sense, I think we take all of them seriously. One, obviously, that takes a lot of time and that we put many resources into. We have a statutory obligation to provide written legal opinions to any state official who asks for it. We get, as I said this morning, 75% of those from the General Assembly. And so we will continue to put the resources into that function to produce a product that is the best researched and written product that we can issue to give our best independent advice. Then other statutory obligations that we have, the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act is another where we have been delegated the responsibility for enforcement. working hand in hand with the Department of Commerce and Insurance through the Division of Consumer Affairs. We obviously are going to keep looking at that, find areas such as we've done with mortgage foreclosure, such as we've done with veterans, to find those areas where we need to devote our attention using the powers that the legislature has given us, as well as, say, with not-for-profits and charities. Again, another area of oversight that we have been given legislatively. That's something we'll continue to pursue. As you said, more generally, in representing the state, sometimes we do have differences of opinion between the two branches within a branch. And in that sense, being a lawyer for a governmental entity is different from being in private practice. Our Code of Professional Responsibility recognizes that at times the Attorney General and the office may have two different clients with conflicting interest, and that we represent both. And when that comes, and when it's not a delegable area, then obviously we will do our best to give them both the sort of zealous representation and advice that we can. There will be other instances where we can take ourselves out and hire outside counsel, but you're really thinking more about perhaps policy differences between the two. And there, of course, we are going to, I think what is important there is that we have good communication with all sides of a particular issue, let them know what our research is, let them know how we reach our conclusions, but ultimately our conclusion that we give them has to be independent and nonpartisan, not in any way influenced by a relationship with one or the other. I think that we do the best job for the state when we give our independent advice so that all of those parties can then decide what is the best way for them to go forward.
Justice Wade?
For good or bad, unlike the other candidates, you've actually had on-the-job training for the last 8 years.
Yes.
During that period of time, of course, we're familiar with the record that you have compiled during that period of time, but perhaps you could identify one or two of the most significant challenges you faced during that period of time. And then secondly, as an auxiliary question, what questions have we not asked that we should have asked?
Well, you haven't finished yet, so.
Ask everybody, don't we?
It's hard to identify most significant or most challenging area just because of the breadth of the office. But certainly one of the great challenges that we had, both in terms of our own internal operations, in terms of the sort of representation that we have provided, is dealing with the economic downturn. That had a great impact on the state budget, which impacted the amount of money that we had to run the office and to pay the lawyers who are already underpaid. It also impacted the sorts of services that we needed to provide. And that was true not just in the consumer protection area, which I've already talked about in terms of trying to address the challenges that people who had lost their jobs or were losing their homes, the sorts of consumer challenges they were going to face, but also the demands on services on many other state agencies that would have been affected by the economic downturn, whether it was in the commerce and insurance area, in financial institutions, in labor, dealing with unemployment, all of those areas. That simply meant that there were going to be greater demands, I think, on the state and therefore greater demands on us. So trying to respond to that in a challenging time was, I think, a real challenge to the office and something that I think we handled very well. Obviously, other challenges are, as I said, we get a lot of questions on opinions on very difficult issues. Generally, people aren't going to ask us for an opinion if it's an easy issue or if it's an uncontested issue. And quite often, we will get questions about pieces of legislation because there will be someone who hopes to stop a bill by getting an opinion from the Attorney General that there's some problem, or someone who has a bill who would kind of like to have the stamp of approval from the Attorney General. And those can be on very contested, controversial issues. And so the challenge for us, and one that I think we have met, is that our duty is to give the best nonpartisan independent advice, regardless of who is for that bill, regardless of who is against that bill, based on the state of the law as it is, to tell them this is what would likely happen down the road with that piece of legislation. And I think that's what we've done. We have provided the best independent advice based on our research as to the pros and cons of a particular bill. And then as to questions you haven't asked, gosh, tell you what, come back to me when you're near the end, and then I'll tell you whether there are any you've missed.
General Cooper, what are your thoughts regarding your current management structure and organizational structure if you were to get a second term? Do you envision any changes? Are you comfortable with where you are now as far as your number of divisions, your leadership team, and your thoughts about merit pay versus pay based primarily on seniority?
Certainly, Justice Bivens. When I came in 8 years ago and looked at the structure of the office, I certainly looked at it and said, this isn't how you would design a law office if you were starting from scratch. But you're not starting from scratch. You're coming into an ongoing operation. And in evaluating any changes that you would make, and evaluating any changes I would have made 8 years ago or today, I think you've got to ask the fundamental question, is the benefit from that change going to be greater than the disruption to the office from making that change? And what I determined in looking at the structure that we had, 17 divisions reporting into a chief deputy who oversees day-to-day operations, was that, one, each division clearly understood what its scope of authority and responsibility was. Each division understood which clients it was working with, and likewise, the clients, the state agencies, knew exactly who they needed to call in order to get their questions answered and their matters resolved. And then three, that the system worked. So it occurred to me that there was no point in making change just for the sake of change, that we had a system that generally was working well, and that what I would do is, as opportunities arose and needs required, that I could make changes to that as we went forward. And that's what we've done. Where appropriate, we had one division that really wasn't serving a purpose anymore. It seemed to combine three functions that weren't really compatible with each other. And so when I had an opportunity due to a change of leadership to move pieces around, I did that. Had the opportunity to create a couple of other divisions which to express priorities and kind of put an emphasis on doing certain functions, and took that. I will say one thing about the current structure, and it's been alluded to many times. Obviously, we don't have the opportunity to pay our attorneys what they can get in the private sector, certainly what they're worth. We have outstanding attorneys in this office. And so, frankly, having a structure where there are lots of opportunities for advancement into leadership, into management, is one way to recognize the great achievements of the lawyers in the office. And so we have that with regard to the deputies in a fairly large number of divisions, with regard to some of the larger divisions having team leaders within the division, and has been alluded to before, with the opportunity to designate people as senior counsel. So having the structure we have right now does have those advantages, as well as the advantage of when we're able to make that promotion, that is a way of not only recognizing merit, but of getting additional money to those individuals, and of creating a large pool of people from which we can then train and draw the future top leadership of the office. So all of those advantages seemed appropriate. Now, going forward, I would certainly expect that there will be changes in the future. but I don't see just a wholesale reworking of the office. In terms of the leadership team, I think we've got a great central office in the AG's office, strong leaders in all of those positions. We have a non-attorney in one of those positions as well as attorneys. So I think that is working well in terms of supervising the different functions. And on merit pay, I think that merit pay is a good tool to have in the management bag. The problem that we have had, and we've talked about this a lot within the office, is that if you look over the last 8 years, we have had more years when the state did not provide any money for pay raises than we had years when the state did provide money for pay raises. And unless you have that money, there's really no way to make a merit system work, because then to give other people a bump, you're going to be taking money away from, you have to take it away from someone else. It's a little bit of a zero-sum game. The only way you can really get into merit is to have that pot of money that you can then use to recognize excellence. So that's one reason why we haven't institutionalized that, because it's not something that it looked like we could sustain annually over a period of time. The state's budget situation still looks cloudy, so I'm not sure that's going to come about. But it's something we continue to look at, and if there's a way we can do that, we will. Although, again, and I think as Mr. Halou alluded to, through senior counsel, through team leaders, through deputies, through other positions like that, we do manage to recognize merit and include additional pay as part of that.
Justice Kirby?
General Cooper,
Yes, sir.
would you address, please, how you personally have worked to foster and ensure the highest level of lawyering in the Attorney General's office? And in that vein, I'd like for you to address the evolution of the position of Solicitor General during your term of office and how you would envision that position going forward.
Certainly. And let me do those in reverse order if I could. Talk about the Solicitor General's office first. That is a very important position in the office and is one that not only oversees the appellate work in the office, it also oversees the opinion writing process and then oversees amicus briefs when they come in. Currently, we have an acting Solicitor General in the office. That is not in any way a reflection of the importance or lack thereof. That's simply a reflection of the fact that when Bill Young left the office, we were, frankly, fairly close at that point to the end of an 8-year term. The Solicitor General's office, I think, is one of the most important appointments that an Attorney General can make, and therefore I thought that it did not make sense to put someone permanently into that, since it would be the person that this court appoints here in the near future who will be working with that Solicitor General, and that person, that Attorney General, ought to have the opportunity to name his own Solicitor General. Now, when I appointed Joe Whalen as acting, I talked to him about staffing on the position and for the office, and asked him whether he felt he needed some additional help in there. And he said no. He thought that he could handle it with the current staffing, but if that proved not to be the case, then he would come back and talk to me about it. So far, he's done an outstanding job, and there's been no fall off in the quality or quantity of work. So, to answer your question, I think that will be a very important office going forward. Obviously, I've given some thought to what I would do if the court were to appoint me as Attorney General for another term, and would move pretty quickly on that. Now, in terms of fostering development of good lawyers generally, that has been a real focus in the office, because we want to, our goal is to hire great lawyers, either young ones who don't have a lot of experience or more experienced lawyers, and then to train them and to retain them so that they will be the future leadership of the office. And that's a little bit of a challenge given our pay scale. But one of the things that we can offer, as Herbert Slater referred to, is a great opportunity for professional development. This is one of the few places you can go and right out of law school get hired and go almost immediately into court to argue motions, to try cases, to take appeals, and that is a good selling point. But once we get them into the office, I think it is important to make sure that they develop professionally so that they will do the best job for the state. That's why we have an evaluation system in the office where new lawyers are evaluated by their deputies after 6 months, after 1 year, 2 years, and then every other year after that up to 10 years with a specific set of questions to make sure that they are developing personally and professionally in the office. In addition, we have set out a particular training schedule that's not just the typical CLE requirement, but where they go and get training, oftentimes through a program that the National Association of Attorneys General sponsors, in taking depositions, in examining expert witnesses, in trying cases. And we have a schedule for people to have done that within certain periods of time within the office to make sure that they're developing their skills. And as part of that evaluation, we make sure that we are communicating with the client, whatever agency or department that the attorney is working with, to make sure that the client is happy with the services that are being provided and that we are handling that client in an appropriate manner. And then finally, that's all well and good, and we get great lawyers, and after about 5 or 6 years, any smart private law firm or someone in the private sector is going to be trying to hire them away. And so then our goal is to find a way. We're never going to match it monetarily, but to find a way to convince them that the quality of work that you get and the satisfaction of public service that you get from working in this office is enough of an enticement to stay in the office.
General Cooper, thank you for your answers. Justice Wade had the question, is there anything we didn't ask you we should have? Do you have anything to follow up, or did we do our jobs well? If you could answer that in 10 seconds or less.
I think you've done a pretty good job.
Sort of set you up for that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your answer.